shut my video off, and all right, I'm going to start now.
All right, good day everyone, and welcome to our panel discussion, The Importance of Protest, which is organized along with I'll Make You Sorry, a group exhibition that we're hosting online at NADA Art Fair right now, and as well as on the greengallery.biz website. So thanks everybody for tuning in today. We'll have about an hour of programming and discussion with the artists, and then we'll open up to questions. If you have questions throughout, feel free to put them in the chat box, and we'll kind of try to address them when we have time near the end. I'm John Riepenoff, the owner of the Green Gallery, and I'm really honored to have worked with LaNia Sproles on this event. LaNia is a Milwaukee-based artist, educator, activist, and friend, and LaNia has been organizing these benefit exhibitions at various scales for different causes, such as Crystal Kaiser, Black Lives Matter, and other organizations. So for this exhibition, all the proceeds beyond what the artists get for their artwork are going to be going to benefit the Butterfly Collective, which we have a representative from Butterfly Collective, JJ, here today, and they'll be talking about the project. But at first, I'd like to just thank Fellowship Art for partnering with this and making this exhibition possible. And Maureen Regali, thank you for all your support. I'd like to thank Diverse and Resilient, who's a fiscal sponsor of the Butterfly Collective, and I'd like to thank NADA for hosting both the exhibition and this online talk. So I'm really happy to be able to share all the artists who were involved to donate their work, and get to hear some of their voices today. And thank you especially to LaNia, who inspired this whole project and did a lot of hours of work coordinating. And if anyone's interested in any of the work that we have here today, again, this is a benefit for Butterfly Collective, and you can email John at thegreengallery.biz, and we can, I can help you purchase the artwork. And thanks for your attention and your support today. And I'd like to give up the screen to LaNia.
Thank you so much, John. First of all, I just want to thank everybody for being here. This is so awesome. This is like a dream for me. But my name is LaNia Sproles. I'm based in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I graduated from the Milwaukee Institute of Art and Design in 2017. And ever since I've graduated, I'm sure like a lot of young artists can relate to this. I think I kind of just saw my art career change, and just sort of like how I insert myself into the art community changed. And now I kind of see being an activist and an artist as like the same thing. They're not mutually exclusive from each other. So I think that's something that's become extremely important to me in the past couple of years. And so I got the great opportunity to curate the show, and also select some of my peers that I feel like are very good at like just making marginalized people come to the front. So I'm just very excited about this, but this exhibition is really just sort of my dream of wanting to talk about the luxuries of pleasure and who has the rights to experience it, and also how codified, or not codified, but like just so how exclusive feeling pain outwardly and pleasure in general are in our society. And I feel like each and every one of these artists do a very good job of either using sort of like very smart and witty tactics to bring that to light. And sometimes it's humorous and sometimes it's snide. And I think that's all very important things to have when you are a person that comes from a marginalized background. But initially, I really wanted to support a up and coming grassroots organization, Butterfly Collective, because I just saw them doing so much good work during such an intense time to be alive in a capitalist country. And I thought that if anything, I could help out and just support the things that I really truly value in my community. And so I'm gonna let JJ describe Butterfly Collective, but that's where my ideas were coming from for this exhibition. And I'm just so happy to see it all come together today. Okay, JJ.
Thank you, LaNia. So for those who don't know me, my name is JJ and my pronouns are they, them, theirs. And I'm one of the co-founders of the Butterfly Collective, which is a social outreach platform for Black and Brown trans folks and gender nonconforming folks here in Milwaukee. Like LaNia said, we are a grassroots organization comprised of basically two folks, myself and Jeannie Green. And we started back in July of this year with a small independent art gallery event that we put together with some friends who were trying to fundraise initially to help their move to North Carolina. And they wanted to also make it bigger than what it was, just to expand that idea beyond just them raising funds for their move. So they connected with us, who saw like a lot of our trans peers like going through a lot of financial hardship, and we wanted to do something about it. And so one of the founders, Flower, she's a musician, and she did a performance at the event, and it was just so nice to see like all of these like different elements of art come together to help benefit our community. And we ended up doing a mutual aid distribution to our trans friends, and then it just progressed and exploded beyond there. We connected with a local punk group, Ball Stomper, who sold like mixtapes, and they gave us some of their funds. And then we connected with some folks who made masks, and they gave us some of their funds as well. And then we connected with Four Seasons Skate Park, and we did Queer Skate Night in August. And then we did it August, September, October with them. And then we connected with the LGBTQ movie group, a film group, and they did a showing called Nothing Apolitical. And they gave us some of the funds from there as well. So it's been so nice to just connect to different groups and different organizations in that way. We've done rummage sales, bake sales, tattoo sales even. Some folks did a tattoo sale and gave us the funds from there. We connected with CEIB in Milwaukee, which was a roller skating organization, and they did a t-shirt sale on our behalf, and they did a design that said "Trans Skaters Matter," which I thought was really cool. And then beyond that scope of just fundraising and distributing funds to folks, we wanted to try to do something different, to not just meet financial need. So we started B-Fly Radio, which is a platform to highlight queer artists in the community, because the local art scene is so like a hidden gem in Milwaukee. And we wanted to highlight that and showcase the amazing talent that we have in our city. We've also tried to curate a self-defense class with another trans organizer who does self-defense classes in New York. We've also done a collaboration with MKE Self-Defense, and we give out self-defense kits. We've connected with Ayuda Mutua, which is another grassroots organization, and we were at their Day of the Dead event, and we were asked to present on the trans lives lost this year and just how to be a better trans ally to prevent more trans violence. We did a fundraiser with Leaders Igniting Transformation, and just so many other organizations who have reached out to us and saw the work that we've been doing since July. And currently we are working with Diverse and Resilient to do a trans needs assessment focus group. And then the participants are given like a $50 stipend for their time, just to assess the needs of the trans community in Milwaukee. And I've just been so blessed and so honored to be able to collaborate with the community that I love and I grew up with. And I'm happy that LaNia reached out in order to help us out and in order to help out the community, because without the community, the Butterfly Collective won't sustain. So I wanted to thank you again.
Thank you so much, JJ. That was a really great description of the many resources that Butterfly Collective offers in the Milwaukee city. Also, I think what is so important about this exhibition is that because being an activist and an artist aren't mutually exclusive, we have to find ways of dismantling this very old system of buying art and providing for our community. And I feel like that's something I recognize right away in all of your work. And also, I think it's best to highlight that I feel like a lot of people in the different marginalized groups are always doing lots of work to protect their communities and their safe spaces. And so I think this is just a good way of sort of like patrons putting their money where their mouth is. Like if you want to support people who come from marginalized groups and backgrounds, you have to reap into that community. And I think that is something, I guess that's something I just want to touch on today. So I'm going to introduce the artist. So today we have Phoenix Brown. Thank you so much for being here, Phoenix. Oops, sorry, I'm gonna read her bio. Okay, give me 1 second, I'm so sorry. Okay, actually, I'll just read Nicolette's because I can't find yours, Phoenix. Okay, found it, just kidding. Phoenix Brown is from Cincinnati, Ohio, an interdisciplinary artist who highlights dialogues around Black feminism, personal narrative, and current events while critiquing Western ideals of still life, landscape, and portraiture. So thank you, Phoenix. Nicolette Sloan, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Yay, I'm so happy. Nicolette is a Brooklyn-based artist from North Virginia. She studied painting at Pratt Institute. She works in varieties of mediums, including painting, drawing, digital painting, paper mache, bookmaking, and anything else that she can get her little grubby hands on. That's what it says in her bio, and I love that part. Yes, and we also have Oscar. Hi, Oscar. Nice to meet you virtually.
Hi.
Hi. Oscar is an artist and designer currently based in Brooklyn, New York. Working between performance and clothing, his work explores the body's individual autonomy to challenge power structures in our lives. So again, thank you guys so much for being here. I'm so excited to get this conversation started. So again, we're going to be talking for about 45 minutes to an hour. And I do have specialized questions for each and every one of you. And then towards the end of our conversation, our chat will be open for questions, and we'll have about 15 to 20 minutes to do that. So if anybody's watching and you have any burning questions, you can always ask at the end of our discussion. So with that in mind, I will get to it. And so I want all three of you to sort of just treat this as if we're in the same room. I know this is super dystopic and very strange, but I just want you to open the way you will answer it, I guess. So, and just like make for sure if someone's talking and just like mute it. But my first question for us today is, in what way do you feel your work helps reveal a fantasy, and whose fantasy is it? And I'll help chime in as we talk. So anybody can answer this question. But I feel like that is something that also lots of marginalized groups don't get to experience, is fantasy and like having space for fantasy. So yeah. And that's yeah, for anybody. Nicola.
I was muted. Yeah, I don't know. I think personally for a lot of my work, I think I'm dipping my toe into magical realism and fantasy and building narratives. And I think that almost like the fantasy that I'm trying to reveal is something to myself, a lot like writing in a diary. It kind of is this like stream of consciousness in a way. I mean, I wouldn't even say that because I'm extremely conscious to an anal point when I'm working, but I feel like I'm revealing some sort of fantasy to myself, or kind of revealing what's underneath the story that I'm creating, because often I don't really know what I'm building, but it is this narrative of fantasy that I'm allowing myself to enter, and often because I paint myself, it's for me in some sort of way. So yeah.
Yeah, I like the way you frame that. I think a lot of times in my work, a lot of my artwork, it's the fantasy is more about my hidden desires and like things that I don't get to express enough, and it's a very cathartic experience for me when I'm in my studio. Yeah, does anyone else want to comment?
Yeah, I can jump in. I think the idea of fantasy in my work is interesting because I think my work is so rooted in real everyday life. But I think the fantasy of it comes in kind of materials, and the idea of kind of queer fantasy, you know, like ostrich feathers, rhinestones. I think I'm so inspired by like drag queens at kind of 80s pride parades that are extremely political, but also kind of giving this fantasy of like beauty and glamour and kind of access to things that we usually don't have access to. So kind of the use of cheap rhinestones and cheap feathers is super fun for me because it's kind of the fantasy of luxury and things that we're not allowed to have.
Yeah, yeah. I almost feel like a flamingo when I look at your work. I know that sounds really odd, but I feel very very airy and very mesmerized by just like things that I want. It's very shiny too. So I feel like that is not something everybody has access to, obviously. And like I always try to, even like I said in my work, I try to figure out just like what that looks like for everybody in my life. Is very it's very compassionate to look this way into your work, I feel like. Phoenix.
Yeah, I kind of relate to everyone in regards to like how like the fantasy is like our fantasy in our work is revealing like a secret fantasy that we personally have in our lives. And I feel like my work kind of reveals my personal fantasy of being able to be in control of my body and who's able to indulge in it, like from like a distance, like people like kind of objectifying me like on the street. So I think me like placing figures into abstract paintings kind of obscures some of that, like that weird sort of like people wanting to want more of my body and to reveal it and feeling entitled to like being able to fully experience it.
Yeah, I guess it does feel also, from what LaNia you were saying about how being an artist and an activist kind of, and it's intermeshed for you, and I feel like it's that almost the way that we are building our work and the way that we're making things is our way of building our own, I guess almost reclaiming the autonomy that we have as artists over our experience, but also what we want to show people of our experience. So I think that's super interesting, especially to hear you guys talk about your work.
Yeah, absolutely. My next question for all three of you is, how do you see elements of reconfiguration informing your making process?
I see elements of reconfiguration in my work through like just the way I construct things, because my work is super collage based. Like I begin with like monotype prints to like create raw materials to collage onto surfaces, or even sometimes the prints are the surface and I paint on top of the prints. And even when I construct canvases, the canvases are usually made of like scraps of like separate sheets of canvas that I like sew together kind of haphazardly and paint on top of it. So it's all like very reconfigure or collage as from like the very beginning.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think this was an interesting question. I think for my work specifically, I'm really interested in reconfiguring context. So it's less about material, but thinking about taking ideas or texts and taking them outside of their context. And it makes you look at the absurdity of them a lot of times, and it makes you look at the ways in which we're conditioned to experience these kind of awful capitalist things. So a lot of times, even with the clothing, it's kind of taking these critiques on capitalism, these protest languages, and bringing them into the everyday street. So taking the context out of, I'm at a protest and I'm saying this because I'm mad, and bringing it into, I'm meeting this person in the street and they're going to have to deal with this kind of idea also outside of its given context.
Yeah, I would say reconfiguration, I guess for me, is kind of in the way that I build my narratives, because all my work is really narrative based and I'm trying to tell some sort of story, even if I don't know what it is while I'm working. It feels like I'm taking little bits of my experience or, other artists that I love and just kind of reconfiguring that to fit some sort of narrative that I'm trying to explore about myself or the world.
That's awesome. How does the role of humor inform your work and ideas, and how does it create safety for you? I want to ask that just because I feel like the short conversation I've had with John and Maureen as we're working and building on this project, that I feel like unintentionally, I'm very drawn to works that make me laugh. And I think there's a power in that. I've always said that to the other side of pain, there's laughter. And I kind of think they go together. Noting that like when something is painfully true, it's hilarious sort of thing. And I think that's something I was very like drawn to right away. So, but yes, if anybody would like to answer that.
I know that I personally, I often feel like my work is very humorous, but I think that to the audience, it doesn't read necessarily that way. I think when I start with ideas, often I'm starting with an idea that does make me laugh. Like for the piece that's in the show, though it is very dramatic, I was like, I want to paint a girl that's just lying on the floor and just like throwing a tantrum and just feels horrible. And like there's something in that feels so humorous to me, and just very being an adult and acting like a child. And I feel like LaNia, like you were saying, like there is that intense amount of catharsis in allowing that. And then of course, through the process of painting, it kind of evolves and shifts into this, I guess, darker image subconsciously, where I'm just like, wait, but I started because I wanted to make a happy, funny painting, but I guess these deeper truths are revealed underneath it while you're working.
Yeah, and I think that's what's so exciting about your work, Nicolette, is that I think a part of being able to have the room in the art world for marginalized people, it's important for them to document how they feel and their experiences, because we're imperfect, and it's healthy to show failure, and I think that's why I love your work so much. But that's
Yeah, I feel like in the same way like comedy and tragedy play hand in hand, it's that, yeah, it's finding humor in the sorrowful things, but also pulling sorrow out of the humor, I guess, too.
Right, exactly. And I think failure is hilarious.
Failure, fear of rejection, of all of that. Just
Yeah. I don't know. I don't think I use humor. I think I'm a really serious artist. But no, I'm kidding. I think what you said is totally real about the fact that, I don't know, life is becoming more and more absurd as time goes on. And my life makes no sense. And half the way I deal with that is kind of address it, but I have to laugh through it. I have to laugh. The fact that like the government wants me dead, like I have to laugh as a survival tool. And it just becomes a part of the way you kind of deal with the evil in the everyday world.
Absolutely. And I think what the humor I see in your work, Oscar, is more about, I just think about the receiving end of the audiences, like how will white audiences react to some of your pieces? And it makes me laugh. Because it's painfully true. Like there's still people who still won't get it when they see your work. There's still lots of white audiences who think it's about them. And I think that's painfully hilarious. And I think that's really why I feel like I brought all you guys together. Is like there's just so many terrible things that we are constantly fighting for at this point, and it's just absurd, and absurdity makes me laugh because what else do we have left to do?
Yeah, it's like the collective experience becomes this one big inside joke.
Yeah. And I also I think that's also a reason why memes have become so popular because they're ways of coping with the absurdity. And even it's even stranger how that way of coping has even become gentrified. Even it's just like every source of joy we have is very controlled, concentrated, and we have no autonomy over it. But yeah. Okay, so do safe spaces exist, and how does your work construct them?
I think safe spaces do exist, and my work kind of like develops a safe space for like Black feminine figures to exist freely without like someone like approaching the painting or like the drawing and like exerting some weird like oppressive privilege over them. So I think I just allow them to like just exist how they would be, because I think of my figures as being like personified. Like I feel like they would have like desires and wishes. So I'm trying to protect them. And I'm also like attempting to return agency to them. So like they're in control of how much like the viewer is able to see of their body. So that's why most of my figures are like obscured or like in pieces. Like I don't want to think of them as like dismembered. I think of them just being selective of what body parts they're willing to show to us.
I don't know, it brings up it's bringing up a lot of questions in my mind also about like where our work exists in gallery spaces, if that's the intention for all of us to eventually be in galleries, if that's what we want. But it from what you're saying, Phoenix, too, it brings up a lot of I don't know, like, how do we feel safe in a gallery space when we have a space that is predominantly white, that when you go to a gallery, even in like Chelsea here in New York, like you go and you walk in and there'll be a myriad of people just standing around interpreting your work out loud. And like, how do you cope with their interpretations if it's so far off from, where the heart and soul of your work? It's like, how do you form that safe space in a gallery setting? Like, can that exist? I don't know.
That's super interesting. And I think I want to jump off that a little bit, especially the idea of, I think my work specifically, I can't necessarily answer the question if safe space still exists. I think, sure, for people, if you find it and you make it. I think the heart of my work is existing in public. I have a background in public performance. I mean, I've gotten like arrested in the street doing performances. So there is no safe space for me and my body. And I know that. So I think the root of my work is taking these issues and these works and bringing them into the public. I have no interest in existing in art spaces because I think it's interesting you talking about having people process your work and getting it away from where it's from. I think I don't give people the chance to have any other idea about my work other than what I'm saying to them. I'm like, you're not going to be talking about my nostalgia and my trauma. Like, you're going to talk about what I want to talk about, because what I've learned now is that artists, they just don't put the work in. If it's not a painting or a sculpture, they won't put the work in to really think hard about it. So I have to like give them everything and not let them stray. And so in that sense, it's like, I don't know, I'm not necessarily interested in safe spaces. I'm interested in taking the space I have and taking control of it and making people listen to me.
How do you protect yourself in a situation like that, though? Like, how do you protect yourself in a space that doesn't exist for you, that's not safe for you?
That's why every day.
It's like,
yeah.
The point of the exhibition is just like, how do we continue to provide these spaces for protection if there's no action behind it? And yeah, there's none. There's no sense of a safe space. And I think that that's something that we all don't get the privilege of experiencing. And I'm very interested in like how, in what way, I guess is my next question, is experiencing pleasure and privilege. I'm sorry, I said that wrong. Experiencing pleasure a privilege, and is expressing pain exclusive, and who gets to experience it and why?
Yeah, this was interesting, and it made me think a little bit. I mean, I think the idea of experiencing pleasure isn't necessarily a privilege, because we all have ways of experiencing pleasure that we can do ourselves and don't really cost money or things. But it made me think this summer when I was living off of $600 a week unemployment and realizing that this constant state of pleasure is definitely a privilege, of having the idea to wake up and experience pleasure on a regular basis without the constant weight on your back of capitalism is an extreme pleasure. And I tried to lean super heavily into that this summer. It was very much like, I don't give a crap. I'm drinking in the middle of the day, hopping over train styles and like just having fun, because I recognized that that was a moment that like I have the privilege to enjoy this. Clearly it went away pretty quickly, but it taught me that like there is a way to have this constant sense of excitement and enjoyment of life, but that is a privilege given to you when you're making a living wage.
Nicolette.
I mean, yeah, I'm just like, I'm ruminating, I'm thinking,
yeah, it's a big question.
It is. It's tough, because even in, I guess, especially with the state of the world right now, you have to find moments like what Oscar's saying, like these tiny moments of pleasure to kind of indulge in, but it isn't an equal opportunity for everyone, and it isn't possible, especially in the state of the world right now with COVID and, you know, under this presidency. It feels like it is something that's harder to attain, and that goes for like everybody, you know, like, but I feel like especially for like, you know, people in marginalized communities and like atypical people, like it is it's a harder thing to let yourself almost experience too, because you have the capacity, but it's like allowing yourself to experience pleasure, allowing yourself to process that, and also process pain. Like, I think that that's something that's really difficult too, is processing the experience that you're going through and the hurt and the just everything. It, like the absurdity of it all, it's a difficult thing to process, and it also is a privilege to be able to process that in your own time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And I feel like marginalized groups don't have the privilege of expressing pain without being policed. So I think that's like super like annoying, as especially being like a Black person, not being able to get upset in public without like being like a threat to someone else. I think that's also, yeah, that goes hand in hand.
Completely. I can't even tell you how many times where I've reacted the way I think anyone would react in this situation, and the blame is put on me. And I'm given sort of this decision whether to leave or stay, and it's super uncomfortable. But how does compassion and empathy take part in your making process? What and who are you drawn to honor naturally? That's just something I'd like to dwell on. It's like, yes, we experience lots of pain, but a lot of things behind the things that we do come from a place of empathy, and a sense of our drive comes from that. And I think I could agree that we all sort of have that drive, that empathetic drive. But also with empathy comes honoring as well. So if there is anyone, again, like they're drawn to naturally, or just like maybe it's a group of people, I'd like to hear.
I wonder if maybe I don't know, sometimes I feel a little bit selfish because I feel like, I don't know, maybe I'm just honoring my experience, but I guess that's all we can do as artists in the same way. But I think compassion is something that I'm trying to offer myself when I'm working. I think it's something that's not offered regularly in the world. I don't think that right now we live in a very compassionate society. I think there are moments of that we can find, but I think through my work, I'm learning and I'm trying to be compassionate towards myself and towards my experience, and like honoring my emotions and how I'm feeling, and like we've talked about prior, just like giving myself the autonomy to feel that and the permission to work through it in my work, I guess. I don't know. That seems kind of vague, but
No, I loved every minute.
Yeah, I totally relate to that. I feel like my work is also kind of self-centered, like with just my own experience, and like just trying to like honor and like recognize and allow myself to feel my anxiety of being othered in public. I think that's like the root of my work and like how I'm perceived by other people. So like honoring bodies, I've always pitied bodies in like Western paintings that were just like positioned just as an object of desire. So I'm just trying to reclaim that space and reclaim my own presence and like in my own environment and like put it into my work.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, I think for me, the idea of compassion, empathy comes in kind of the text, and also I think we talked about memes and also this idea of like being seen, and this idea of like the work representing this kind of lived experience that we are going through. I think I'm making work for me and the girls, me and my friends, me and all the people who are like really in this shitty place. And I think there's power in just like feeling represented in that. When you have the weight of capitalism on your shoulders and then you see someone else going through the same thing and you're like, okay, you know, it doesn't make you feel as bad and feels like you can survive a little bit longer.
Yeah, absolutely. That's so, it's actually, this is a conversation that I've been having with a few of my friends recently too, is about like building this community and this space for you, but also just like, I don't know, just like allowing yourself to have a community too. Because I feel like it can feel so alienating to each of our experiences, so vastly different, can feel so alienating, but like having people creating the spaces that you want to see exist in the art world, which I think obviously like LaNia, you've done beautifully with this show. It's like creating the space that like you want to see, the people that you want to see, the people that you want to champion. And I feel like that's so important. And like, it's almost like, yeah, it feels good to make art for other artists and the people in your community.
And I think that's kind of an inherent skill we have to learn as kind of like people of being like constantly being told like you have no place here, so you have to build the context yourself. And I've been tired of it lately. Being like, well, I want to develop my skills and opportunities. Like, sure, I'm gonna have to build everything myself, but it's also annoying.
Yeah, it is. It definitely is. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, it's okay. I also feel like it's like a catch-22 because we tried to develop these spaces for ourselves and then people still want to insert themselves in it when they're not a part of like the community or not a part of this group. So I'm like, there's like no like win, or it's not as satisfying as I wish it was to make our own spaces.
Yeah, absolutely. I think like that is something I take very personally too, is like I have to honor these people because who else is helping me build this? And it's, I think that I just think that there's something magical about marginalized people coming together and it being a sacred space, because there's something a lot more nourishing about it that we don't necessarily get when it's a slightly more integrated. I think it's important that we all have our own spaces and the power to just feel whatever we feel like in those spaces. That is our God-given right, and that is not up to other people's standards. So that takes me to my next question. Can exoticism be abolished? What are some ways we as marginalized people communicate our plights for protection, and to whomst?
It's a tricky one, because especially, I don't know, I would love if exoticism would be able to be abolished, but it almost feels like it's being amplified in a way, just with like social media and the amount of images that we kind of consume on a daily basis, and the amount of images that are being created on a daily basis, and just like, I don't know, I just feel like it's almost being amplified in a very weird way that I don't know yet how to describe, but it does feel like it's almost gotten more fetishy and weird, and I don't know.
I agree with that, because like I don't think our society's ready to like abolish exoticism, because it's like it's profitable, like it's really,
Yeah.
it's really scary. But to answer the other half of the question about what was it, like the plight, like how to describe plight, or how marginalized groups describe plight, or sorry, I forgot the other half.
Sorry, I'll say the question over again. Can exoticism be abolished? What are some ways as marginalized people, as marginalized people communicate our plights for protection, and to whomst?
Oh,
So,
yeah. Oops, sorry.
No.
What I was going to say was that I feel like marginalized groups have used every avenue to like describe plight and to ask for help and support, but like the only effective like form that I've experienced is just through a creative means of making, and then it's only like heard if it's like profited off of. So it's like I don't know, it's like counterproductive, but it's like productive. It's just a weird juxtaposition.
Yeah, it feels like nowadays, especially like the commodification and marketability of like self is increased exponentially. I mean, not to be all like social media influencers, whatever, like it's that like commodification of self. It feels like the only way that you can kind of get your foot in the door is if you also participate in that, and you also kind of, you have to become like the bad guy too, almost, and you don't want to.
Yeah, I think the idea of, I think as long as we still live under white supremacist rule, we won't get rid of exoticism. I think there's ways of, I think a lot of my work explores that idea of like, again, like kind of what Phoenix was saying, the idea of people consuming you and your image without any interest and support. I think so much of my work has explored that in the sense of like, okay, you want to see me in a great outfit, then I'm going to rhinestone it with a bitchy phrase so that you understand that I'm mad, and you're going to consume my image, but you're going to consume it in the way that I want it to. And I think the second part of the question, it's interesting that I think also Phoenix said the idea of like making work sometimes can do that. I'm in an interesting space where I'm tired of making work about my plight. I make the work, it's great, no one sees it, and then nothing happens. So I think one of the things I've been doing lately is just, one of my favorite things, my friend has been texting me sometimes when she's in bad mood, she's like, I'll buy you a drink and can I just complain for an hour? And I'm like, I'll do that. And like just having those friends that you can just complain to and then just go home and be like, I just had to get that off my chest, and kind of have someone understand where I'm coming from.
Yeah, it's so sacred. And I take that so seriously. I try to make those moments happen every time I meet any new artists, because I know that this is what we're sort of working with in that sense. But I'd like to ask each and every one of you your specialized questions, and please feel free to chime in and respond to the questions. So Phoenix, I'd like to ask you, how does respectability politics come into play with your drawings and paintings?
I would say respectability politics comes into my work through like just returning agency back to like the figure, and also just representing them in a way that I wish I was represented in my work. Like it's pretty simple. It's not super complex about respectability politics in my work. It's very direct.
Do you feel like sometimes that people have a hard time understanding how to view the Black femme body?
I think so. I guess more like in a direct way, people just like reduce my work to just about racism, and that's like not what it's about. I mean, Black femme bodies are like bigger than that. You know, there's like other intersections where our figures are like a part of. So I don't know. Like this is like was a tough question for me to answer, but
That's okay. We don't have all the answers, right? Like we're just kind of figuring it out, and I think that you're really good at portraying that in your work. Is just like, I'm just figuring it out. I'm just figuring out just like everybody else. And but I know for a fact, this is how I want to be perceived. And I think that's something that you're very good at proving in your work. Would anyone else like to respond to that question? It's okay. This is like sort of awkward because we're like over the computer. And okay, I feel so robotic. But I do have a question for you, Oscar. What separates your work from the problematic world of fast fashion and its popularity?
I think the kind of like first thing is the fastness of it. My works take a long time to make. I think people think I use a bedazzler, but I hand apply every single stone on my work with a little stick. I was taught by an older artist who taught me that. I kind of come from LaNia. I've always been someone who makes things the hardest way possible in order to learn how to do it, and then it gets easier from there. So I think, yeah, just literal the time. I was talking to my friend the other day of just like wearing things until we die and just like having things forever. And I think that's a big part of my work of like, it is something you own. It may not be something you wear all the time, but it's something you own hopefully for the rest of your life, because it's not something you just like try on, it falls apart and you throw it out. And I think that's an important part. I don't know, I'm kind of figuring out where my work lies now. I think in my early 20s, I was brainwashed to be an artist. So I kind of work in this one of one way of working. There's one piece. I don't necessarily work in collections. So it's the idea of like, this is it and this is the work, and you own it for the rest of your life, hopefully.
Very ephemeral quality to your work. And I think
I love the idea of kind of the lived experiences. I have pieces that are kind of falling apart and I love it because it's like, I've worn these, I wore these to protest, I wore these out, you know, I did things with them, and the fact that they're falling apart is a part of their legacy. It's not that I'm trying to sell these pristine works. I'm trying to sell lived experience and works that have a function.
Yeah, and that's precious in itself. Everything like that must be, and I think I can kind of see that in the way you construct things with a very, which is very sensible eye, and the way you apply lots of the rhinestones is very calculated and very on point. And I feel like that speaks to what you just spoke about. My question for Nicolette is, what role does shame come into play in terms of what environments your figures are placed in?
I think, geez, okay. So shame is definitely something that shame, guilt, feelings of like humiliation and feeling foolish or like you're doing something wrong. I think that's stuff that I'm really interested in exploring and pushing forward. And I think that the environments that I'm choosing often, especially now, I feel like I'm moving into sort of these enclosed environments that kind of, as we've been talking about creating spaces, it's like I'm creating this environment for the figures that I'm working with, which are often depictions of myself. So it does feel like within the painting, I'm also creating this space for the figure to experience shame, experience guilt, experience negative emotions or a tantrum or whatever it may be. I'm constructing those, I guess, from my mind. Often I do use a lot of reference in my work, but I feel like when it comes to the environments, I'm often working those out in my mind and creating them from the lived experience, but creating them in order for the figure to exist in this like magical realist realm, I guess.
I think what the reason why I asked that question is because your work sort of reveals this like just this collective grief we go through as a prepubescent human. Like, I'm sure if you rounded up like 15 people and asked them if their best time in life was middle school, they're lying.
Yeah.
So
it's totally that way that it almost those experiences you had growing up and in adolescence just follow you and stick with you, and they're like barnacles on the bottom of a boat, and they're so hard to scrape off and so hard to get away from. And with that, obviously, like growing and your body changing, there's so much shame in that. It's almost, I feel a lot of like betrayal from the human experience, I guess. It's like, why does it have to be this way? Why does it have to include so much suffering? It feels like you are just put on earth to be perpetually betrayed by just growing and experiencing things. So I guess it just, I don't know. It's my overdramatic way of being like, life's not fair.
Yes. And it's funny because when I look at your work, it reminds me of like any time I was in middle school or like high school, and like not knowing I was queer and just sort of being weird around other people of my same age. And I think it also sort of reminds me, there's a show called Pen 15, and I absolutely love it. It's so funny, but it's what makes it so good is obviously not just the writing, but I think the way they're able to like portray these characters that are that are kind of meme worthy almost. And I think sometimes people that we often cringe at, so like maybe our 12-year-old self, and we're shameful of how they are portrayed because we see a part of ourselves in them. And I think that's that goes for anything that you sort of cringe at. And I think that's why we love, as a young group of people, why we love memes so much in our community. But I just want to ask a few fun questions. So which work in this exhibition are you drawn to and why? And also if anybody is familiar with any of the work that they've seen, because I know it's just a little different talking to you guys during a pandemic, so it's not like I can really get to know you that well. So yeah.
Go ahead, Phoenix.
Okay. I was really like drawn to, like, I have it pulled up on my screen, but I'm really drawn to Zoe Hawk's aquarium. Like, I think it's a print, and I really like how it's like a cube and they're like all these different figures just like interspersed in between or in like this weird jello water. And I just like how cartoonish it is or how graphic it is. I kind of resonate with that because I like practice like kind of cartoonish figures in my work. So I really like the way it was like produced and handled in the materials.
Absolutely. I loved LaNia Holland-Weiss's work. I think that's how you pronounce her last name.
Mm-hmm.
That painting is gorgeous. Oh my God, the painting included in the show, just the color in it is absolute, like just from a painting standpoint, it's gorgeous, but also just in a lot of the stuff that I really enjoy, like the way that the figures fit in the frame, and also just like the compassion that these figures have for one another. It's a really powerful image. I really, really am drawn to that. And of course, Oscar and Phoenix, your work is you guys are fantastic.
I really liked the piece by, it's right next to me, I'm going to read it, Cielo Felix Hernandez. Gorgeous work. I think we're in a really interesting point of I think the Latinx community is really building our collective identity at a time right now. And I think it's really interesting to look at contemporary works by Latinx artists and kind of see the ways that they're representing the kind of amalgamation of their identity. And I think as a Latinx person, I'm super invested in kind of exploring more artists like that and seeing kind of like how we're building this really confusing new identity.
Thank you so much. So my next question is, what is some advice you can give to young marginalized artists navigating a cis, white, hetero-dominated field? I wanted to ask this because I feel like as I get older, I realize that like other younger artists, they'll start to look up to me, and I think it's really hard to explain like what it's like to be bitter and to just keep going. So I just want to hear what you guys have to say, because I've been getting so many questions lately.
I would say quit. And then I would say that I hope that my life and whatever I build, it can be I hope my words don't help anyone, but I hope whatever I build for myself in my life can show that like you can build something outside of the art world, and should.
I agree.
I think the advice I would give is that not everything happens at once. Like, I feel like younger artists, we feel like we should be like successful like immediately and overnight, and it's really not the case. Like, it's like over a 40-year career where we're getting like honors and stuff. So like just feeling not the pressure to be successful every single day, and like feeling like enabled to take a nap, and it's fine to not do anything. I think that's like the greatest self-care.
Absolutely. I don't know. I don't feel qualified to be giving advice right now. I feel like I need advice all the time. But I don't know. I think especially in pandemic times where we can't see a lot of people, I think it's important to still maintain that sense of community, because that's what's, at least for me, that's what keeps me going, is allowing myself to be in the same room with other artists, even if we're doing nothing else. But like, I think that sense of community kind of keeps me going and allows me to continue painting and continue drawing and making things, even when I feel like I don't want to. And it feels really hard to. It just feels like, yeah, I don't know. Just continue that community. That's the best advice, I guess.
Thank you guys so much. Yeah, for sitting down and taking the time to talk to me today. I had such a fun time. This was a very interesting conversation. And I also just like to see, because technically you guys are my peers, and I like to hear what you guys are thinking and if we're feeling the same way. But I'd like to just do a preview, share my screen of Phoenix's, Nicolette, and Oscar's work. The show is up until the end of this month, so December 31st. Just gonna share my screen here. So right here on the Green Gallery website, you can scroll through right here. So this is Nicolette's work. I love this piece. And right below is Oscar's, and I believe Oscar has, yep, 2 pieces. And I just have to go to the next tab. Oops. And then we have Phoenix. So Phoenix has 2 pieces, a painting and a very lovely drawing. But I just want to thank you guys again for being here. I am going to open up the next 15 to 20 minutes for questioning. So anybody watching out there, if you would like to type any questions you have for any of the artists, for me, for Green Gallery, for Butterfly Collective, and Fellowship.art, please refer to the chat. So first, our first question from the chat is from Sierra Berry. She says, what role do you feel your work is playing in regards to historical context and or documentation of current events? How do you see your work functioning in the next 10, 15, 20 years? Thank you, Sierra, for your question.
Yeah, I'll start because I think I'm obsessed with this idea to a negative point where it's I date the heck out of my works just because I'm constantly reflecting on the world that I live in. There have been points where, I mean, I made a work after the shooting at Parkland, Florida. That was just a big garment that just said, in 2018, adults are inept. I don't trust anyone over the age of 25. I was 23 when I made that, and people loved questioning me, like, what are you going to do when you're 25? What are you doing when you're 25? Still holds up. It was how I felt then, and it's how I feel when adults won't listen to kids who are in a school shooting. I think my work continues. I think the work that's in the show is such a reflection. I mean, I responded to the fact that we're in the middle of a pandemic. So I think a lot of sometimes my work is a little too on the nose, but I cannot stop thinking about the fact that like my work isn't timeless. It's about what I'm living through right now. And it's a reflection when you look back of how horrible life was.
Yeah. And racism isn't over. So it's like a continual like thing that we have to dismantle.
I was once told by like a local curator that it's not the artist's job to decide like where their work is placed inside of like an art historical canon. And at first I like believed that. I'm like, oh yeah, I guess. But I was like a student. And now the more that I reflect, I feel like it's important for us to define where our work falls into this canon and what we're documenting, because my work documents like my emotions. So like if I feel like if I left it up to someone else to decide where my workplace is placed, like I feel like how I feel and like my anxieties and stuff will not be heard. They'll just be erased and like lost to history. So I feel like just keeping like sort of like a timestamp or a track record of like how I'm feeling and other people around me are feeling is very important. And I also feel like my work's going to date kind of weird because I use a lot of like technology to make brushstrokes on my work. I use a lot of like Snapchat and Photoshop. So I feel like those digital imagery might might not hold up in about 20 years or so.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Maybe it's naive of me to not even consider that when I'm working, I guess. I don't know. I feel like it's inevitable that our work factors into the historical context because it's the experience that we're all going through. But I guess I don't know. I can't even see the work that I'm making now functioning at all in 10, 15, 20 years. I hope it's very different. I hope I am working very differently and my work has evolved and means something else. I can't imagine working on feeling the same way I do now 10 years from now. I hope not. Like
I think as a young artist, I was thinking so much, I mean, I still am one, but thinking so much about like the cyclical nature of time of like, I felt there was so much context for my work because I grew up loving Adrian Piper and Vito Acconci and these artists who were in the street in the 60s and 70s, living through similar experiences. And their work doesn't seem like, oh my God, this is so old, we can't deal with it anymore. Like it's still issues we're dealing with now. So I felt that there was always an importance in dating your work and situating your work in the social issues that are happening at the time.
It's almost inevitable too, like going back to what you said right in the beginning, LaNia, like about art and activism. It's just, it's inevitable. It just happens.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, I don't know. I think that's just what sort of breaks up those roles is capitalism. I think it divides people in that sense, and where the lines get blurred and we forget that we are activists. We can take space and we can take control of what context our work is being digested in. Okay, so our next question from the chat is from Michael Colazzo. Does the labor put into your artwork feel powerful? Does it feel like the energy you put into it keeps up with your emotional needs as an artist during this racist climate? It's been racist forever, but it's very vocal right now. Thank you, Michael. And Michael Colazzo also has work in the show. So thank you, Michael. Yay!
Yeah, I think labor is a really interesting part of the work, especially making clothes. I think people don't really think about it as much, right? Of like, I drafted the pattern and then I measured the pattern and then I cut it and I sewed it and I rhinestoned it. So it is an important process. I think I'm such a self-taught artist that the process for me is learning. And so it's less about like I don't know, focusing so hard on like the process of it, but learning from that process and then developing as it goes on.
I sometimes feel like something I'm fighting with is the amount of labor that I put into my work. I feel like sometimes I can overthink and exhaust myself to a point where I am giving all the power to the work versus like taking the power for myself. It feels even weird to say taking power. It feels inappropriate. It feels like I don't deserve it. Like I don't, so it's a weird, I don't know, weird word, weird concept. But it does feel like when you labor over a painting, often mine take a lot of time, many weeks, months, whatever. I'm sure all of us are like that, but it does feel like so much of you goes into it, and so much of your like emotional needs, like Michael said. I'm sorry, I'm a little all over the place answering this question, but
don't worry about it. Answer it however you feel.
But I feel like it's hard. It feels like maybe it doesn't match up, but I am pouring so much of my emotion into the piece, and so much it does feel like I'm giving too much of myself to the work and not taking that autonomy back for myself and things like that, I guess.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm kind of the opposite. I feel like my work doesn't keep up with my emotional energy because I'm always spinning like 4,000 miles an hour. And also like my taste in painting, it hasn't caught up to my skill level in painting. So that's always infuriating. So I find like other means to like release like creative energy. Like I like to write and I like to read literature and I like to play my guitar. I recently picked that back up after quitting for like 5 years. But I don't know. It's just really weird how to like protect my energy, especially in this climate. Like, I don't know. I'm not sure how to like answer that.
Yeah. It's a really good question.
Okay, thank you, Michael, for your question. That was a great question. I got a private question. So, how has the pandemic changed your artwork? If it has not, this is from Debbie Jett. Also, a very cute message to Phoenix. Hi, cousin Phoenix, miss and love you. Just say that was really adorable.
I guess I'll answer first. So I feel like the pandemic has just changed like my workflow more so. Like I don't think my practice has changed. I did start drawing a little more than usual. I used to didn't really draw that much because I didn't have time to sit down and make like one small piece, but now that I do, I've just been kind of going into it. So I think that's like the only shift I've had. It's just the amount of work I've been producing. I got kind of slowed down.
Yeah, absolutely. I think right now, yeah, I've just been drawing more also, just smaller things, not really painting as much as I want to, but it is harder being like a neuroatypical person and dealing with like protecting your mental health during this time, because it is really hard. Yeah, so that for me, it's almost like that's my priority right now.
For me, it hasn't changed my practice at all, and I'm kind of mad about it. 2020 was supposed to be the year that I move out of my DIY stage, but now that I'm locked at home all the time, it's back to, I've always been a DIY person. I'll make everything myself, shoot everything myself, edit everything myself, do it all. I'm kind of tired of that and would love to work with new people. I moved to New York right before the pandemic, so I've really just been in my apartment for whatever, 8 months. So it really hasn't changed it as much as I want to change my practice right now. It's still just me in my bedroom with a tripod.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of artists have been getting this question a lot, and I just have been politely telling people who aren't makers just to be like, just don't ask. It's polite. We're all struggling right now. So we have another question in the chat. It's from John from Green Gallery. John Riepenoff. He says, do you think your practices imagining and making your artwork influences your ability to imagine and change your worlds? I see this quality in LaNia's ability to make complex personal narrative paintings, as well as build a world of community connections which tackle similar topics in social form. How are these acts of creating related for each of you, if at all?
I think this kind of comes back to the idea of, I think Phoenix was talking about these ideas that we deal with of like how your body's consumed. I think coming back to the clothing pieces, I've created a world in which it doesn't feel bad when strangers stare at me in the street anymore because I have something back to say to them without ever having to talk to them. So it's a way of taking that weird space and creating that new world for myself, which is just, again, rethinking the context and rethinking how I can use my body in those spaces.
Yeah, it is in inventing the world we want to see, or the world. It's not even inventing the world we want to see, but inventing the response that we have to the cards that we were dealt, you know?
Yeah, I agree with that, especially the part with like, responding to the cards that were dealt. I think that's exactly the same way I would put it.
Yeah. You have no choice. You were dealt it, and you just got to handle it now.
Right. So it's obviously more about like not necessarily changing how we live in the world, but just changing our perspectives and changing the way other people take in and view us. I think that's the part that's the most important. Let me check to see if there's any more questions. Okay, JJ from Butterfly Collective. This is for anyone to answer. Could you speak on the importance of BIPOC youth being at the forefront of social change and in art movements?
I think it's great, but it shouldn't be the expectation. White people need to get off their butt and do these things. Because in the end, BIPOC won't get the credit they deserve. And that's just the job that we have to do those things, but I don't think it's fair and it should be the expectation.
Very one-sided.
Yeah, I would have to say, I think it's important for everybody to be a part of it. It's not just, this is a people problem, not, this is everybody's problem. And I think once we move away from it being a singular issue, that's when we really start to see some changes.
Yeah, and I think it's important, but I also think it's something that's a little, not necessarily inherent, but it's something that's gonna happen, is that marginalized people will be at the forefront because we just have to deal with it.
Mm-hmm. I also think because we're younger, we tend to fall shorter on the end of the spectrum in terms of what we have financially. So I think our experiences are just going to be a lot different. Okay, let me see if anybody asked any more questions. It looks like that's about it for all the questions. Again, I just want to thank all three of you so much for your time. This has been a really wonderful experience. I hope that all this has brought you really good joy in this really crazy time. Yeah, and I can't wait to keep seeing your work. And I just can't wait to see like what else you guys make. But I just want to thank everyone on the panel. Thank you, Green Gallery, John, Riepenoff. Thank you, Maureen, for coordinating this and helping me do this. Thank you, Phoenix Brown, Oscar Chavez, Nicolette Sloan. And thank you so much, JJ from Butterfly Collective, for joining in and talking about the different resources that they offer. Thank you, Nada, for hosting this on your platform. And thank you to all the interpreters. Honestly, wonderful job. I love when things can be inclusive as possible. So thank you so much for all your hard work. Yeah, so thank you. Hope you guys have a great day.
So much, LaNia. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.